Good evening, dear all. Welcome to our first program of a new edition of Two Gift Talks. My name is Emina Haji, currently a master student of political economy based in Istanbul. Today, I have the honor to be welcoming a really important guest. But before I introduce herself, I would like to briefly present to you the main idea and the aim of Two Gift Talks platform. In this regard, we will have the chance to discuss and evaluate the emerging new topics when it comes to economics, politics, social development, culture, and arts. On this occasion, professionals across the globe will be joining us. Today, I'm very excited to host Dr. Humaira Awais Shahid. As we presented, Shahid is a scholar, is a lawmaker, journalist, media strategist, and a two-term provincial legislator in the Punjab Assembly of Pakistan. She focuses primarily on the economy, foreign relations, human rights, media, and communications. She has been lobbying, advocating, writing, legislating on these issues worldwide, and moreover, participating at different conferences of very known universities and organizations. She is the author of the book titled Devotion and Defiance. Furthermore, she has worked with USA policy institutions as Inclusive Security and Harvard Women and Security Program. Shahid is the first parliamentarian of the Provincial Assembly of Punjab to pass a law as a private member. Dr. Humaira, I want to express my gratitude and welcome you to our first program of Twiga Talks.
Thank you very much, and assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure for me to be hosted by my Turkish brothers and sisters. And Turkey has always been very close to my heart, so it's my privilege.
It's our privilege as well to have you here as in our first program of this new platform. And as we have announced for this week, we will talk on how women can dismantle capitalism. And of course, I want to direct my first question to a professor regarding the importance of political economy establishment. I want to know more, Dr. Humaira, about the position of institutions and policy making, especially here. Of course, I want to be informed about your experience of this passing law in the parliament, please.
Thank you very much. It was a miracle, I would say, that a person like me ended up in the parliament, because I don't come from a political background. I was a journalist, and I came on reserved seats, which are for special people who are come under the category of experts and technocrats. So it was a miracle. But before I tell you what the kind of crazy thing I did in the parliament, which was not the norm, for me, it was a journey of my heart. So I want my viewers to understand it and feel it, because it was a kind of an breaking of the norms. It was like a kind of enlightenment for me. As Sheikh Ibn Arabi says, that Herat is Marfatullah. So I want my viewers to have this state of bewilderment, Herat, and then listen to the story that I have to tell you. So in 2001, I ended up in the parliament, and it was General Musharraf's time, and we were on the reserved seats. Well, I'd been working almost a decade by that time on women issues, acid crimes, violence against women, rape victims, and my whole focus was on policy issues and how I could improve the conditions of women. But it all started from two girls coming to my office. In my newspaper office, I was working as a journalist. And these two girls told me the story that they were in the field of prostitution. And they were forced to the prostitution because they were indebted to certain moneylenders. And it was a life-shaking, horrifying story for me to listen to these two young girls who were forced by their moneylenders to do this horrendous things in order to pay them back. So that was my first, uh, you know, exposure to what usury is, what riba is, what private money lending does. And it was followed by, I kind of posted an advertisement in the newspaper that all the victims of, usury and money lending contact me. And it was followed by more than 700 people coming to my office with their stories. And I realized money lending issue was monumental. Now, the problem for me was being an Islamic country, I could not understand how these predatory shock loan money lenders could be unleashed on people where they were forcing women into prostitution. They were, taking up people's properties, pensions. They forced people to give their daughters into marriages, and I was like surprised. There was a whole world that opened up to me. Now, I said to myself that, and there was one dua I made when I got elected in the parliament, and I kept on doing that dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I said, Allah, give me the work that nobody wants to do. Give me the work that will bring your pleasure, your raza. And I didn't realize that riba is going to be that issue. And Allah put me in the center of this money lending usury, and I promised that whatever my capacity would be, I am going to fight this to the end. And you won't, without realizing, 5 years, in the 5 years of my in the parliament, 4.5 years, I kept struggling for this bill. Anyway, when I moved the bill of riba, which prohibited private usury, I could not touch the government usury and the banking establishment because, as a provincial member, it came under the national platform, the national parliament, that particular issue. So I picked up the private sector riba. And the moment I moved this legislation, I had a huge reaction. And the reaction was my party was not happy with me. I was threatened, asked, and discouraged that you have to take this back. And I said, why should I take this back when this is the heart of the issue of Islam? And this is exploiting people. And the constitutions that we have taken oath to, the first line of the constitution is the sovereignty of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But that was my beginning of understanding that usury was the core of capitalism. And this could not be addressed in parliaments. In fact, they have never allowed debate on that. So, in the process of 4 years, I understood that the doctrine of capitalism comes from liberalism, and the liberalism and the whole historical movement starting from the French Revolution and then the Glorious Revolution, and how usury had been legitimized. So when a lot of people talk about what liberalism is and how do we understand, and I realized that the key concepts of capitalism: free market, free trade, limited government, free contract, free enterprises, was always hypocritical. Because in retrospect, if we can understand more what was happening in the 17th century and 18th century and the 19th century, and the way this whole framework of liberalism and the doctrine of capitalism was pushed. Because I don't know how much people understood during those times, but very carefully, very craftily, the capitalism which thrives on usury and monopoly has been induced and is all over in every institution, and that's what the core values are. So when I question what free market is, it's not free market as free. It's a market free from regulations, which means you can do whatever you like. You can make riba halal, you can make a monopoly halal, you can eliminate other monopolies, and you can create your own monopolies. And it was a way of creating, before capitalism, we had public markets. And so the public markets were pushed away, and with time, they were abolished. And free market, in the name of free market, private markets were brought forward, which were controlled by monopolies. So free market actually means something very dubious. And then exactly like that, we have free trade. Now, free trade is also like free from regulations. I do whatever I like, creating your own monopolies, creating the kind of trade contracts you want, where there is no religious, cultural, traditional regulation at all. But we thought we are getting free. The liberalism was a movement against the authority of the church, or liberalism was against feudalism and aristocracy. But in the long run, in the coming centuries, it created its own doctrine and its own monopolies and its own usurpation of resources. So in the same way, the role of the government was limited. The government cannot rule, put regulations. And today, in the name of free market and free trade and free contract, we have, private corporations who are bigger than countries today, and you cannot regulate them. And everything that made usury and monopoly legitimate has come through the route of democracy and parliament. So every law was passed, and today, so in today's time, when somebody like me gets up and is trying to question where this riba comes from in our society and why it has been imposed, and I'm saying this in the House of Parliament, and I am not allowed to debate. So the parameters of criticizing capitalism and liberalism are very controlled. So today, when we say freedom of speech and freedom of rights and freedom of everything, any criticism that is going to be against liberalism or capitalism will be deleted, will be discouraged, will be pushed away. And that has been my repeated experience, even in a country like America, which it says it's a free country. You cannot talk about capitalism. You cannot talk about liberalism. You cannot criticize it on legal forums. And if you do that, I mean, the media there just, deletes that, omits it. Even anything I said pro-Islam was so easily deleted from my speeches and my debates and everything. So the moment you start doing this, so secondly, then what really happened with capitalism, usury and monopoly, but what were the core values? So instead of collective good, what works for a lot of people, we had individualism. What works for me? And what works for me comes from, I can show greed, I can show selfishness, I can show my personal profit comes before everything. And whatever suits me, I do it. And there cannot be any regulation, any moral regulation or legal regulation coming on that. So we had a kind of a collapse of every moral value of what we owe to the society to make decisions and policy that work for the commons. The commons were destroyed, the institutions of the commons were destroyed. So we have individualism and we have this kind of a facade of freedom in the name of free markets and free trade and freedom of speech. And, if capitalism was so good, we should feel free and we should be prosperous and we should be flourishing. But what is happening today? So there's a disparity between the rich and the poor, and the poorer are getting poorer and the richer are getting richer. So my question was again then, what is parliament and what is democracy? And I don't know about other countries, but I'm sure it's like the same experience everywhere. We have 20 families, rich elite families that control Pakistan. They are, they are the owners of all major corporations. They have dominant representation in the parliament, and every decision that is being made over the years was to suit the financial establishment, the banks, and these elite families. So it was never about the commons. It was never about what is good for the people. And the whole idea of political representation that we are talking about. So when we brought a democratic system and gave it a power of legislation, we actually gave a blank check to them that they can make laws and they can tax us how much and however they want. And that is not the will of the people. That do not represent people. It represents the oligarchs the financial elite and their interests. And that is what was happening. And that's why a bill like mine, which questioned the core issue of usury, was discouraged. I received threats. I was intimidated by my party. I was asked to take the bill back, and I had to like struggle to get voted it for. And honestly, when it passed, I'm telling you, I cannot take the credit for it because it was Allah's doing. I was no one in front of those political powers and the financial powers who had made usury legitimate. And my bill categorically said usury is haram and is punitive and should be forbidden. And one of the things I realized later on, when one of the professors at Harvard University, said to me, he said, "I cannot even understand how were you able to pass a law that made usury punitive." And I said, "Is it such a big deal?" And he says, "Of course, my dear, it's such a big deal because it took them 400 years to legitimize usury. And some woman in some parliament in Pakistan gets up and prescribes a punishment to usury and makes it punitive. So he said to me, you are the first drop of rain, finally saying what is wrong and what is right. Because everything in capitalism is designed around, this, while, democracy and parliament is like a theater going on. In fact, the financial decisions, the fiscal decisions are never taken to the parliament. They are done behind the doors.
Mhm.
So whatever we call a democratic representation is a facade. If we and for a person like me, how do I understand a constitution that legitimizes national debt, that legitimizes legal tender? It does not let me choose the medium of currency that I want, and that legitimizes usury and riba. I have to take an oath on that constitution. And on the other hand, my first oath is on Quran and the scriptures of the Holy Scriptures, and that says that riba is a war against Allah and His Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, who my loyalty is to my oath as a Muslim first, and I cannot accept a constitution that protects the core instruments of capitalism. So this whole thing about, you know, what do you say, that free markets and free trade, and it's all about there should be no moral regulation and usury should be permitted. And I would like to, if you could please show me that the paper. It's all the steps of realism. Yes, exactly. That I would like to share with my viewers, and this is something I would like them to have if there's a way of sending it to everybody. That what step by step liberalism, the way it was introduced, how these core values were changed, how they took over the commons, how they took over public institutions, how everything became privatized, how and for example, one of the things that is the Constitution talks about, you know,
Here we go.
uh, yes, exactly. So this is something that, it's the stepwise step for these students of political economy to understand liberalism and how capitalism is its praxis. So this is how the first a few lines give you the references as well. And this movement started. Protestantism was the first one that decriminalized usury. In fact, Protestantism was the only way that they could do it because the Catholic Church would not allow riba. So as you go down, John Locke, Adam Smith, Jeremy Bentham were the key figures of this movement. And what are the core values? I mean, capitalism is the natural order. I mean, this is something that we should only laugh at. And then selfishness and greed is commendable. Recommended is also the key to prosperity. So my interest above everything else. Usury is like commerce, and this is wrong. Usury and commerce are different things because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I've forbidden usury and I've made trade halal. They are opposites. They are like fire and water. So that's why today we do not have genuine trade. And then God is liberal, practices laissez-faire, and all this, and then I didn't have the time, but there's something that I can share later. The number of laws that were passed in different countries to make banking and usury part of the legal framework, and then the privatization of the common zone principle, and how constitutions was where the capitalism's doctrine was endorsed and legalized. So coming back, I think we can close this, and anybody who wants this document will be available for them to use it and to. So
Yes, of
coming
course.
back to constitution and liberalism. Liberalism is a movement that started from England, and England has been the country that really embodied it. And we have to understand what British did in the through East India Company to countries like subcontinent Hindustan, India, which are India and Pakistan today. And if I get a chance later, I would like to do a whole presentation about that, because it is the most brutal violation and butchering of the people of the subcontinent. We were one of the richest nations before the British Raj. China and India together were 50% of the GDP of the world before British Raj. Only one of our provinces, Bihar, the province of Bihar was 12% GDP of the 50%. I mean, we were rich, we were affluent, we had these institutions, we had waqfs, we had public markets, we were thriving before the British came. And it all started with imposing paper money on us. And before we realized that paper money was the source of the biggest theft, or our gold and silver was taken away and we were handed over pieces of paper. And then from there on, how they took over, how many famines subcontinent saw, the kind of, from being a huge industrial and a developed prosperous country, we came to famines and starvations, and we were depleted of our resources. And the amount of theft that the British did on the subcontinent is horrendous. So perhaps we can go into that in some other day. But East India Company, with its capitalism and liberalism, is the best example of how they destroyed the world. They destroyed the culture, they destroyed the religion, they destroyed the economies, they imposed paper money, inflation, taxes, they took away our public institutions, our waqfs, which were the most amazing way of an example of self-sustainable societies, and markets and himams and madrasas and hospitals and orphanages. I mean, the waqfs were so big that they financed all these public institutions, and they were open to all. They were for the commons. How they disappeared and how.
Yes, actually, yeah, I wanted. I'm so sorry for interrupting you. I just wanted to know, like, what were these institutions like Wakf and public markets, and why they have disappeared now?
Well, could you please open my presentation on the
Of course.
public market, because I would like to walk my viewers, step by step, because you
Okay.
see, the waqfs were so huge. And all right, let's just go through this first. So this is a public markets. It's something that have disappeared, because with capitalism, the public markets were taken over by private markets. So today we have malls, today we have retail markets or wholesale markets, but we do not have public markets anymore. So what is a public market and why? And one of the things that I want my viewers to understand is that we have to go back. In order to dismantle capitalism, we have to understand not only how they mantled the capitalism, but what were the institutions that were destroyed and taken over. And for that, I think Islam has preserved this the whole science of markets, and we have to go back to the template of Medina. And Medina, when the Prophet migrated to Medina, the two things he did was The first was the mosque, and the second was the souk, which you will call a public market, was built. So, why was souk and mosque put forward at the same time? It's because one is the economy and what is the worshipping, is what is the identity of the Muslims. So, if we remember, our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was a trader, and he was part of the caravanserais. Now, these words are something which are part of the Persian culture, the Muslim culture, Hindustan, Turkey. So we somehow know them, but we have really forgotten what was the function of public institutions like public market, caravanserais, and what was Hans. So we have to like go back and exactly remember what these things were. So public market belongs to the people, all right? And it is wakaf. So wakaf is the property of Allah. It cannot be sold, it cannot be expropriated, it cannot be taken away, and it belongs, and it's a shared property of people for their use, exactly the way the mosque is. Now, mosque is something where anybody can come and pray. You cannot have a hierarchy who stands before the first come, first serve. So the rules of the market and the rules of the mosque are almost the same. In Muslim societies, it is the waqf. So all these mandis is a word that comes from our language, Urdu. Um, all these mandis were huge. And the amount of, your Grand Bazaar of Istanbul was one of the biggest public markets before the fall of a caliphate and before capitalism arrived. So the public market have a complete access to marketplace to either buy or sell. It cannot be privatized. And let me explain you. It is opposite of mall. In mall, you buy shops, you mark your place, you have to pay rent, and your goods are taxed. But here in market, whoever comes first, the first thing is it's open to everybody. Everybody can be a trader. Everybody can buy and sell. And whoever comes first gets the first chance. So, and number two, it cannot be privatized. So the market, and before us, the Romans had it. It was also a huge part of the European tradition. The public market has always been there, whether it was east or whether it was west. And we had a guild structure system with it, which has also disappeared. So with Islam, we got perfection of the markets because we have a Sharia that applies to trading. And thank God, because Islam has been preserved, we still have those principles of the Sharia of what is allowed in trading, what are the conditions, what are the rules, what are the principles. So Islam somehow preserved this science, which has been abolished since the last 100 years now. So we do not have even a single market, public market anymore. What we have is private markets, private corporations. So the word in Medina is used is souk. The next slide is about the public market in Islam is the souk. And what is the souk? The souk, So when Rasulullah arrived in Medina, he built a mosque and a public market. He said, "This is your souk. Do not build anything with stone. No permanent reservations on it, and do not let any tax be levied on it." So this are the conditions of the souk, of the public market. And I remember there was a time at the time of Hazrat Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu, where one person tried to make his place permanent. He was thrown out, he was exiled. So the conditions of the souk are very, clear. The souk is public, like the mosque. It is sadaqah, with no private ownership, with no rent charged, with no taxes, where no reservations or claims can be made, and where no private shops can be constructed. You come there, you sell, you buy, and there are warehouses where you can store your goods, but you cannot have a shop which is permanently yours. So this is one of the conditions of Islamic trade. So what makes a public market unique? Well, what makes it unique is, big or small, every trader and every producer has an access, has a leveled playing field. So the rich people or the big corporations or the small corporations or a big trader or the small trader, they will all have an equal opportunity to sell and buy. It's not one above the others. So it's like a leveling playing field. A big corporation can sell its goods, so can a small company do. So when you have buyers and sellers at one place with the same fair play, then nobody's above each other. They have equal opportunity. Plus, you don't have a mediator. Right now, for example, let me give you an example of what a mediator is. If we want to buy a good, we usually go through eBay or Amazon because we need a kind of a guarantor about the seller, and we don't know the person who's selling. And so we have a mediator, and a lot of profit between the buyer and the seller goes to the third party. And in a public market, the buyer and sellers come together. There is no third party. So either the buyer benefits and the seller benefits. And there is a healthy competition. You will not have those kind of super priced goods, because it's always the third party which adds its profit. So that doesn't happen in public markets. So creation of jobs, I mean, 30,000 people were trading in the Grand Bazaar of Istanbul. Imagine the velocity of money. Everybody's a trader. You don't have to be an employee. If you can sell other people's goods, you can produce your own goods, you can do it exactly, without a third party or a mediator. And the people who provided services, there was lots of local commodities, local services, and it was a place of thriving and prosperity and trading. So looking back, let's go back to the history. Like, the Ottomans perfected the art of the markets, the science of the markets, the art of the markets. So the core of the Medina is, which the Ottoman Empire implemented, was mosque plus public market, which is souk, and together it was called imarat. And the next slide, which is about the Islamic city. This is how the Islamic city was designed. The housing and the residence on one part, and the souks, which were big, on the other side, and how there were walls around the city. So this was the model of every city of Islam, of Islamic civilization. You will find the same in Iraq, you will find the same in Persia, you find the same in Hindustan, you find the same in Andalus, you find the same in Ottoman Empire. So these were our, so because we're talking to a Turkish audience, so I just want to remind you what the Grand Bazaar of Istanbul used to be. The next slide talks about the covered market, and was built immediately after the conquest of Constantinople. So the moment the Ottoman Empire's foundation was kept there, we had the market. And so all these sultans, the amazing, glorious rulers of Ottoman Empire, they knew what public market was, how crucial it is to our deen. It is a key of prosperity. It is a hub of trade. The biggest sunnah of the Prophet is trade. And they all were not owned by the government. They were not owned by the sultans. They were waqfs. And these waqfs were so huge, and they were so prosperous. And it's the best model of a self-sustainable city. Because if there is a change of a king and a sultan, it would not affect the traders or the merchants or the economy of the people, because whatever happened in the palaces and the politics of power, these cities were run on waqfs and public institutions. They were self-sustainable. They they did not, that's why there were no taxes. And these people, these wakafs, they funded orphanages, they funded hospitals, they funded madrasas, they funded himams, libraries. And that was what we used to be. This is how Islamic cities were, and this is what the economy was. Now,
And
the
Professor,
world,
I'm so sorry again interrupting you. Here we can just again emphasize the role of women, especially in these curves as well. So the role that time and present. So how the woman in past dismantled the capitalism, and how is the role of woman now currently nowadays?
all right, that's very important because one of the surprisingly, I I have always asked how was the women's economy in Islam, and it was very later that I came and found out from the scholars that the first souk of Medina that was created, the main traders were women. I mean, aren't you surprised to hear that? And the first inspector of these trades was a woman inspector, the Muhtasib. So women were part of trading. Now this takes us back to Hazrat Khatija Raziyallahu ta'ala anhu. She was a partner of the Prophet in trade. If you remember, she was a partner, and there were a lot of other women trading. So what were men doing? Men used caravanserais, and they were the ones who were doing cross-border trading. Well, the women did the local trading. The markets, the sellers were the women. So there was a whole female economy. And you have to remember those times that the soldiers, most of the men were soldiers. They died in battles, or they were prepared in battles, or they were away because of the jihad. And it were the women who were running these economies. Now, instead of going into this politics of divisiveness that we have today, we have divisions of gender, now we have sexual identity, we have politics of class politics, other politics. I think women, in how capitalism affected them, is that we have become defeminized. And let me give you two examples of that. The two examples are, like, if you climb in the ladder of power and politics, you have to, your role model has to be somebody like Hillary Clinton or somebody like Condoleezza Rice. Now those are not women. Those women have become masculine in masculine structures. What we need is women. With women comes the heart. With women comes a kind of a empathy, compassion, bonding, bridging. Women love, nurture. So that's our intrinsic nature. That's how naturally we are. And I think what the broken society of today, where family structures have been destroyed, where compassion, empathy doesn't exist, and greed and selfishness and robotic life structures have taken over, that's where a woman can heal. And not only that, women can build the markets again, because women are the key players in these public markets. Women were traders. Women know how to work in a team. Women were sellers. You know how many women are there who do a lot of commodities? They make these handicrafts and they're not able to sell. They are the worst victims of these. So bringing public institutions like public market, bringing women, and I think we need to show the West what real feminism is. And that feminism is, how do you how can women build an economy based on trading? How women can be a pivotal role in building up the institutions again. And the Sunnah, and we have all the examples in the life of the Prophet of how women ran the economy. Unfortunately, the Islamic scholars somehow don't talk about it. They don't refer on it. We have very little documentation on it, but there is very authentic documentation, in the classical literature of Islam, where women were traders. And I believe the alternative to capitalism is trading. We have to bring back the trade. We have to have a policy of commerce and trade based on the good, on what suits the commons, what is good for the commons, what is good for collective society, not what how it feeds to the profit and greed of an individual. And women are, community builders. Women are bridge between cultures. Women empower empathy, healing, nurture, trade. We are the best sellers because we know how to talk, we know how to communicate. And perhaps, my dream is that we create a market, a public market of women in the Grand Bazaar of Istanbul, a huge market for women entrepreneurs, because this market does not create employees. Public market creates entrepreneurs. It creates, it empowers you. The whole idea of social entrepreneurship, which has disappeared, is something that women can master at it. So if public institutions and women playing key role, now if we have to give a solution of, okay, capitalism is bad, what is the solution? How do we come to the main point? Remember that trade cannot be done without trade route. And the key to the prosperity of Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, the Persian Empire, the Hindustan, and China was the Silk Road. This Silk Road, which disappeared the moment the capitalism was established. Now, isn't that amazing that the Chinese are bringing back the Silk Route? And this Silk Route was the key of how new cities were created, because these traders in Caravanserai means foreign traders who went to these markets and they had this free space of living and selling their goods. So these caravanserais over the years on the Silk Route historically became settlements. From settlements, they became cities, markets. From markets, they became cities. And today, that's why, if we can go back to the presentation, because the last 3 slides are exactly about what the Silk Route is, what these markets were, and how we can incorporate them today.
Yes, of course. Just in a second, last 3 slides will be appearing.
So you see, what trade brings is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the 9th, 10th of the risk comes from trading. And where all the provision lies, we have actually, that sunnah has disappeared. So trade, the countries don't even have trades anymore. It's all about monopolies. It's big corporations doing all the things. It's not a common trader. It's not small companies. It's not small enterprises. It's not small entrepreneurs. They have disappeared. So so if we go back here, 200 to 50,000 and 400,000 visitors daily did trading at the Grand Bazaar of Istanbul. Imagine the prosperity coming. Imagine how many entrepreneurs were there, how many traders were there. It was listed #1 among the world's most visited tourist attractions. And more than 30,000 people were providing services there. They were working there. So what now this, we had a similar Wakil Bazaar in Shiraz. We had a similar Bazaar of Tabriz in Iran and Asfahan. And in the same way, we had this in Hindustan. So what is China really doing? I would like you to go to the slide that is called the Silk Route Today. So from Beijing, could you move forward? Move back a little bit, where the Silk Route is shown.
Yes, just in a second.
It's very interesting what China has been doing. China is experimenting with different kinds of cities. They have made a technology city, an agriculture city, a lot of other cities, and somehow they experimented and create Yiwu. It is one of the biggest international city of China and worldwide. So if we could move to the next slide.
Yes.
I want you to see Yiwu in the coming slides. There are 2 images where Yiwu is the international trade market, and then coming, The total area of this market is 6.4 million square meters. The number of stores is 80,000. The category of goods that are sold there are 1.8 million. And there are 300,000 visitors every day. And you can look at, could you please move to the next slide?
Yes.
It is a huge city of trade. Now, it is almost 80% the template of Medina. And Yiwu has become a case study for the world because wherever this city had no population, and the moment this market was created, it had people started moving there, traders all over the world came over there, and then local commodities started selling. And they are very intelligent, the Chinese. They started creating small factories with these people who were doing these products. So they have actually put together the public market that had disappeared for more than 100 years back. So one of the key things is that we, as Muslim countries and all the countries, we need to have a trade and a commerce policy that is for the commons, not for the elites, not making more monopolies. So, and bring back the infrastructure, this market with Islamic principles, for example, free infrastructure for everybody, where everybody could sell and buy. You are bringing back an integral institution that belongs to the commons. You are restoring power to the commons. You are restoring Islam, the sunnah of the trade, which has disappeared. And when Turkey and India and Pakistan and Afghanistan and Iran today are going to develop these public markets again, it's going to create the real wisdom of the Silk Route, which has disappeared all over these years. We don't want corporations to, flourish from the Silk Route, the new BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, as they call it. We want public markets. And China somehow has manifested in this model that how these markets work. So the key to replace capitalism would be to bring back guilds, you bring back public markets, you bring back caravanserais with the Islamic principles of trading, with a policy that works for the common, which gives an equal opportunity to compete for the commons, which is not about monopoly, which is not based on usury. And of course, then there is a big question of replacing the promissory, the fake paper money, which they call money, with the real money, which is our money, which is gold and silver. So all these questions, geostrategically, BRI has become the most important development of our century. And right now, America, with its crumbling dollar and the kind of capitalism is coming to probably an end. I mean, there is no way that they can recover that system. So the new system is emerging from the East: Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, Malaysia, China together. So the East is now bringing back all those institutions that had been abolished in the past because of capitalism. And I believe that this Yiwu market and all those people, you will find a lot of material about this on Wikipedia, on a lot of international websites. And the the immensity of this market, and this is how the market should be today. And what we need to do is replicate these markets in our countries as part of the BRI route. And being part of the BRI route means 66 countries coming together in trade. So trade is above capital. That's what Islam says. Trade creates entrepreneurs, not employees. Trade is the key of prosperity and provision. And that's what Islam has been, has proved that for thousands of years. And I think Ottoman Empire, all the sultans, they were so specific about traders and trading institutions, and they had protected the waqafs, the public institutions. And I believe that is the key. And perhaps my dream of creating a public market of women, between Hindustan and Turkey could come true.
Inshallah. Professor, we have some questions. I want to go interactively. So may I just direct to you to the first question?
Yes, please.
So we have the questions from Amina Keishi saying that do you see so-called influencer culture as a challenge for women in dismantling capitalism?
What does she mean by influencer culture?
Influencer culture, maybe modern career expectations is the second one is maybe like kind of interconnecting with the first one. So influencer culture, and does this one appear any challenge for women in dismantling the disassembling the capitalism?
If influential culture means media and social media, and I think women have been a victim of that, and there's a lot of trolling and a lot of shaming and a lot of way of commodification. Remember, the commodification of women is not a recent phenomena. Women's body, women's face, women as a commodity has been sold as part of the capitalism. How women are seen as part of the capitalism. What I believe is, I think women should be a big source of bringing back the commons movement, the public movement, the wakafs. And I think, you see, what has happened is we just have one narrative, and then one narrative is replaced by another narrative. So I think we should get out of narratives. We should start building something. And that's where you prove your feminism. That's where you prove your influence as a woman. That's where you show the world that, by doing things, not by just saying it.
Exactly. And the second question is do you think that modern career expectations force women to masculinity? You said that Clinton and Rice are not the right model.
Yes, they will not let you be a woman on, I'm telling you, whether it's politics, it's media, you have to have this patriarchal, within the patriarchal structures, you have to be more man than a man. And that's what women are doing. You cannot show emotion, you cannot show compassion, because women are different. We have a different kind of intelligence. We are more intuitive, we are more wiser, we have a different kind of depth. Our heart is stronger than a lot of other things. So even the feminine economy, or the feminine culture, or how certain cultures are defined as masculine and feminine, bonding, connections, bridging gaps, communication, are all female traits, and they are discarded. The capitalism is very, very masculine, and it has very masculine structures and patriarchal. Within the patriarchal legal systems, you have to just behave like that, otherwise you are not promoted.
Exactly, exactly. Professor, I don't have anything to add. I want to express my heartfelt thanks to you for honoring us with your presence. It was indeed a very insightful speech. Like you provide us an excellence. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Amina, and I thank all the viewers who have been there, and it was a pleasure for me. Salam
It was a
alaikum.
pleasure for us as well, and I hope one day we can invite and host you in Istanbul.
I would love to.
Thank you very much.
Inshallah.
And uh, thank you for all our viewers. Here is the end of the first program of Two Gift Talks. Stay tuned. We are coming with new topics and new professionals joining and expressing their experience and thoughts. Thank you very much and good night. Stay healthy. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you.